Hello and welcome once again to the Slate Breakdown. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Denny Carter at CD Carter 13. Obviously, it's Friday morning now. We're talking about all the Sunday slate, the breakdown. Last night's breakdown was the Bengals kind of did exactly what Vegas expected them to do. Aside from Tyler Eifert getting 3 touchdowns, nobody really expected that. Johnny Manziel wasn't awful, significantly improved from before, but still, we were talking a little bit before the show, just still kind of erratic. He just didn't seem comfortable. He made some plays, but he missed a lot more plays than he really made. Like the highlight to Duke Johnson, that throw down the field, everyone was showing that as one of his best plays, but I mean, he threw it about 8 seconds too late, or it probably would have been a touchdown.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Manziel actually doesn't have that much of a ceiling. I know I heard, Manziel and GPPs, but I didn't buy into that much because I think that his floor is probably better than his upside in that offense with nobody catching the ball, basically. I will say that in the slate breakdown, I pointed to the Browns against tight ends as a case of having to or needing to apply some context to points against, because if you just look at the points against that the Browns are giving up to tight ends, they actually look really tough. It looks like a really bad matchup for Tyler Eifert. But if you look at who they've played, when they've played a team that has a tight end who has a big role in the offense, like Antonio Gates, like Delaney Walker in Tennessee, they've actually done really well against Cleveland. So there was some. I mean, no one thinks their tight end's going to catch 3 touchdowns,
Unless your tight end's Gronkowski, then you always expect 3.
Right, Eifertkowski here, but no one thinks that. But I think that the Browns are a team that will be generous to tight ends if the tight end is an integral part of the offense.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense when you look back at their games in the past few weeks. They had a game against Denver before they decided to ever throw to tight ends. I mean, I think, what was it, maybe 2 catches for tight end in that game. So definitely the context there really important. Try to find some stats that everyone else doesn't already have. Next up, Bills and the Dolphins, 1 o'clock game. Fortunately, no London game this week, so I won't be sleeping in, but at least I won't be watching bad football at 9:30 in the morning. So 44-point total in this one. Bills small favorite. And finally, one of your favorites, or maybe he still is, I don't know. It's been a couple weeks. Ty Taylor probably going to be back for this one. And Dolphins looked incredible for a couple weeks under new head coach, and then the Patriots happened. But, I mean, the Patriots happened to everyone now.
Yeah, I mean, Ty God, and I have not forgotten him, is another guy who, I don't really see as appealing for tournaments, but I really do see as a cash-saving, high-floor option in cash games. His lowest total this year is 15.9 points, which I know that's not fantastic, but you'll take it for what you have to pay for him, especially DraftKings. He's really cheap this week. Not bad on FanDuel either. He's eclipsed 40 yards rushing 3 times, which is big for his floor. So, even if he struggles through the air, which it doesn't look like that's going to happen this week, at least it doesn't shape up that way, you have that boost on the ground. I mean, 4 points just on the ground is significant, and he has that rushing touchdown potential as well. So, if you're not going Tom Brady at the top of the heap, I like Ty God.
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned, 40 yards there. I mean, that's a touchdown pass because most sites there, 4 points for a touchdown. So you get those 40 yards, you can kind of survive if you don't get as many actual touchdown scores. And the fact that he runs, I mean, 6 points potential for a touchdown rushing rather than 4 for passing. So you got to like that floor there. I know you mentioned Charles Clay here, and Charles Clay kind of disappeared without Tyrod Taylor, and we saw early in the season, I mean, that he was easily the top target. Saw him have a couple huge games, and I mean, his biggest game should have been even bigger with that touchdown called back too. So I am a fan of Clay this week. Aside from him, what's your take on LaShawn McCoy? Because we see some people talking about him. Maybe what's your take there?
Well, McCoy had a decent game against Miami back in September, but it's easy to forget that I think he touched the ball fewer than 10 times in that game. He just happened to get a goal line carry and took it in, and that sort of saved his day. I'm not big. Honestly, I'm not big on McCoy this week. The one thing that makes me a little hesitant to just dismiss him is that the Dolphins give up the 8th most schedule-adjusted fantasy points to running backs. So that says to me that first of all, I think this game has high scoring potential, and so that's one thing. But McCoy's price is just not very suppressed. It's
Yeah.
just not low enough for me to think that to feel comfortable with plugging him into cash contests.
Yeah, I'm with you there. As far as the Miami side, is your main target going to be Jarvis Landry? Probably going to be the more popular play on that side. As far as tournaments go, is there anybody else you like, or are you kind of sticking with him, or are you cool with some stacks? I know you mentioned it's potentially a high scoring game for you.
Yeah, so opposing quarterbacks are averaging almost 41 passes per game against Buffalo, and that's mostly due to teams just not being able to run against that front seven, and so we'll take that. I mean, if you're we don't chase quarterback volume typically, especially if you're looking for a nice floor, but we do chase wide receiver volume. So if Tannehill is going to drop back and throw it 40 times in this game, which I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities at all, then you have to figure if you look at the target share, market share percentages for targets for Miami, Landry's going to see 10 targets if that happens, and that's probably conservative. The Bills cornerbacks are less than intimidating, so I think that you could get a lot out of Landry. I'm tending to plug Landry into GPPs mostly, but that's because I really like his upside in this one because I think it could be. Let's see, the Vegas over unders 44. I mean, I don't know. I really think neither of these defenses are very good, especially the Dolphins being on the road. They've really struggled on the road defensively.
Yeah, and I mean, right around a 20-point total for Miami seems really low to me, too, so I'm with you there. Panthers and the Packers, this one has some appeal. It's a big game for both teams as far as playoff positioning goes. Packers coming off of really the worst game of Aaron Rodgers' career. 77 passing yards, played the entire game. I mean, it was not even necessarily a product of him playing bad. It was just that defense was so good in that game. I mean, granted, he didn't play great. I'm not complimenting the guy on his performance, but it was just a dominant performance. So this one here, obviously, we've got Eddie Lacy finally got in the end zone. We've got Randall Cobb, who's been virtually non-existent for a month or so here. Probably going to see some tough coverage. So this is one where I feel like I need to get some pieces, but I just can't pinpoint what I want to get.
Yeah, I'm not playing Rodgers in cash games. If you really want to pay up, you're paying up for Brady,
Yep.
I think. The one thing about Cobb, and I pointed out in the article, he runs more than 90% of his pass routes from the slot. So he's taking on the cornerback for Carolina, the one guy who's not great. And I hesitate to pronounce his name.
I saw it too. I was kind of hoping that you would say it.
No, I don't know. Is it like Benny Wickery or something?
We'll go with that. It sounds good. It flows.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I've looked at slot receivers against Carolina have actually fared pretty well. Cobb being the de facto number one target. I'm not totally opposed to going in on him. The one Packer that I will have some exposure to is Eddie Lacy, which rest in peace, my bankroll. But it's one thing that teams have been able to do against Carolina, or maybe been forced to do, is run the ball because of Josh Norman and that really good secondary. Teams are just not gaining yards through the air, but they are moving the ball on the ground against Carolina. Carolina's allowing the 11th most schedule adjusted fantasy points to running backs. We saw Lacy not look as horrible as he has last week. So if you think that the Packers are going to score to almost 25 points, like Vegas implies that they will, then I think you have to like Lacy to be in on that scoring. And so he's really, actually, his price has been slashed since the beginning of the year. I mean, I forgot to add that number in there, but I think it's dropped by at least like $800 on DraftKings or $1,000. So he's out there, and I really like him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm still a little bit hesitant on. I don't know if my bankroll's recovered from last time I had him in cash games, but I'll definitely have some pieces in tournaments because we've seen it before. I mean, when he's heavily involved, when he is healthy, I mean he's got a good floor and big upside. So I'll have some pieces there as well. Vikings and the Rams. This one not very exciting. Only a 40-point total in this one. But the two most popular young players in the NFL, at least as far as DFS goes, Todd Gurley, a.k.a. the entire Rams offense, against Stephon Diggs, who I guess he's half of the Vikings offense. But Rams with an 18.5-point team total, probably expecting Todd Gurley to score 18.5 of those actual points there because, I mean, I'm not a believer in Tavon Austin. People throw him in tournaments. I still haven't played him yet. I'm not going to start playing him now. So what's your take on Gurley here? Because now DraftKings still hasn't caught up, but FanDuel went ahead and just said this is the top guy, most expensive, but he's still under 7K on DraftKings.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to pass, right? It's hard to pass that up when you're talking about the guy with just an enormous ceiling every week with the number of carries he gets, the percentage of snaps he sees, and the fact that he's averaging over 3 yards a carry after contact, which is a lot. It's a lot, especially when you're getting volume. Guys will post 4 yards a carry after contact, but they're getting like 5 carries a game. So it's just like one big run that they break. But yeah, I mean, 6.1 yards per carry for Gurley. The matchup is not great. I mean, the Vikings have actually been fairly tough. The one exception is obviously getting nuked by the Niners on Monday night to start the season.
It's looking worse and worse by the minute.
Inexplicably. I mean, what did we learn? Nothing from that game. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, on DraftKings, I can't not have him in my lineup right now. And FanDuel, being the top priced running back, it makes me hedge a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying for the floor, and it's kind of the Devontae Freeman effect from the last few weeks after he had those huge games. You paid up for him. I had him in cash games the last couple weeks. He didn't get the touchdowns, but still gave you that really nice floor with the yardage. So you're paying for the floor, hoping for the upside, basically. So I'm on the fence there as far as cash games with Gurley on FanDuel, but DraftKings for me, I'm with you. It's still a pretty obvious one. And the crazy thing is, I mean, for weeks you've known it's coming. Like, 2/3 of the snaps, you're handing the ball off to Todd Gurley, and it's not like they've been really creative with him either. I mean, it's run right off tackle, run up the gut. It's incredible how good this has been.
I think that there's an element of FOMO, fear of missing out here, and I think it's justified. I think everything statistically and anecdotally really points to Gurley one of these days going bananas, right? Yeah. I mean, he's gone, halfway bananas, but I'm talking 200 yards, couple touchdowns, that kind of bananas, and that could be any week. It doesn't. The matchup is not, really doesn't dictate that for him. I want to say one thing about Adrian Peterson before we move on. Yeah. Since the start of the 2013 season, he's averaged 15.1 fantasy points in Minnesota wins, and then 12 points in losses. So, I'm sorry. That's actually that's this year, not since 2013. But yeah, that's this year. So he's actually not a great high ceiling play at all right now. But his floor, we see here, is not awful.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So, real quick before we move on here, obviously Stephon Diggs still cheaper on DraftKings than FanDuel. Really popular last week. I mean, insanely popular. Still really cheap there, much like Gurley is. So, I mean, he's going to be pretty chalky in cash games too. What's your take on Diggs? Cash game for you on both sides or no?
If I'm using him, it's in cash games. The Rams hold their opponents to so few offensive plays, either the first or second or third fewest plays. And, so the Vikings offense being just kind of toothless anyway, just makes me think that the projected 40 points for this game is possibly generous, if that I know it sounds weird, but
I agree. I mean, it's these two offenses are woof.
Yeah,
not good.
Right. And I kind of can't believe that Minnesota is projected for 21.5 points. I don't know how they're going to get there. The Rams defense is solid, and that offense stinks.
Yeah, and I'm still a fan of the nice high floor you get from that Rams defense, because that front seven gets after the quarterback as well as anyone. Next up, this one, It's going to be pretty for one team. The other team, thanks for playing.
Yeah.
It's Patriots now. It seems like every week you get one or two more points in that Vegas total. By the end of the season, it's probably going to be 50 per game. Who knows?
Yeah.
33.25 points roughly here in this one. 52.5 point team total. This is just a situation where I just don't see any way that Washington competes in this game. I mean, you've got Jordan Reed. You got to like him because they're going to be behind. They're going to be throwing. And I mean, we've seen him have big upside, kind of, game script proof, really, because he's a guy that's a main target regardless. But the Patriots side, it's you pick your pieces, and you just hope that the pieces that you pick get theirs before we see this game get way out of hand.
Yeah, it is sort of concerning to think about the crazy game script that could develop here with how bad Washington can be. And I know they're coming off that inspirational "you like that" win against Tampa, but
perfect spot for a letdown.
I mean, yeah, it's not going to be close, and so Josh McCown was, I think, a good play a few weeks ago in a game. I can't remember which game, but the Browns were huge dogs.
I think it was the Broncos, right?
Yeah, well. Yeah, it was that. It was another. Against the Ravens, they were pretty big underdogs, right. And so you just thought, well, throw him in there, and hopefully, he'll have to throw, and we'll see what happens. And he did fantastic. That's sort of how I feel about Kirk Cousins in this one. I mean, the Washington is not going to be able to do their thing and run the ball with Matt Jones and Alfred Morris and blah blah blah. They're going to have to throw. So I have the Cousins Reed stack in quite a few GPPs. Because I like to burn money, and because I just think that they're going to have 2 quarters at least of just chasing.
Yeah, and I mean that's definitely viable. I'm on board with that one. It's on the Patriots side. Seen a lot of talk about Deion Lewis, and I get that It's incredible how they use this guy who was essentially just an irrelevant player in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, last year even, and I mean, I think it was 9 catches he had last week. They're giving him looks in the red zone. They're throwing down the field to him. The guy has just shown that he can do it all. So I'm a big fan there of his in this game. But I don't know. I saw some rumblings about the Patriots defense. I don't think I'll be playing just because, like you mentioned, garbage time. Washington's going to be scoring some late points. I mean, they're a good defense. They're not a great defense. This is right. The Denver Broncos here. If it was the Denver Broncos in this matchup, I'm all aboard.
Yeah, Patriots to me are not a cash game defense. But man, when you have Kirk Cousins throwing it 40, 45 times like he's probably going to do here, that's awfully tempting to me. I mean, look at this could be a game where Cousins throws for 400 yards and 3 picks.
Yep.
And
loses by 20.
Yeah, and so I am throwing them in there in GPPs because I believe in Cousins' turnover potential.
Yeah, and I'll say this. As soon as I saw this and I saw the spread, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was reminiscing about the game where I guess it was 52-7. I couldn't remember the exact score, but I think it was 2007 when these two teams played. And everyone was asking Belichick after the game. They said, why he went for it on 2 4th downs with the game 5 touchdowns, and I think it was 38-0 after that. And he said, why would I kick field goals? He's like, we're here to play. And they just, it was so brutal. And I mean, they were throwing down the field. They put in Matt Castle and threw it down the field on 4th down. I mean, it was, it was brutal. I'm not saying it's going to be 52-7, but I wouldn't be stunned.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Speaking of 52, Drew Brees put up 52 last week, more than that number of fantasy points in some leagues. And I had the unfortunate situation where I ended up playing against him in 75% of my season-long leagues somehow. Man. So that didn't end well for me. If you had him in tournaments last week, you probably made some money. Hopefully you made some money. Facing off against the Titans here, I mean, I feel like this week, it's not that I don't like Drew Brees this week, but recency bias, I feel like it's going to have his ownership way higher than it rightfully should be.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying I'm going to completely fade him in tournaments, but I'm not going to have a lot just because I don't think that there's much value in that.
Yeah, well, Tennessee is not generous to opposing quarterbacks. I mean, and for whatever, they're not good. It's not a good defense, but quarterbacks are not going ham against them every week. The one I've mentioned this stat. it's hard to ignore Breeze in any sort of middling matchup in the Superdome. Since 2013, he's averaging 30 fantasy points per game at home. I mean, which is 7.5 points more than on the road. So we can see on the road, not great, but that's a real thing. Like that's for him, that is a real thing. That home away split. Though on DraftKings, I feel like there are at least two better cash game quarterback options, cheaper than Breeze. We'll get to those later, but so I don't have much of him this week.
Yeah, I agree there. And then, excuse me, talking about Willie Snead here, of course, had a big game last week, and you get Jason McCourty looks like going to be on him this week. So Willie Snead, another guy probably going to be pretty popular. He, Benjamin Watson. So I guess my question for you then is, if you're going to play one of the two, Watson or Snead, what's your preferred play?
Oh man, that is a good question. I have to say Snead because, like we mentioned last week, and good for you if you had Watson in your lineups because wow, he went ballistic. But his share of the New Orleans targets is just like this. I mean, it's all over the place. It's 1 week he gets 10% of the looks, the next week he gets 25%. So it's just like good luck predicting this week. He's the games in which Watson has gone off. He's done it against really bad teams that are really bad against the tight end. The Titans are not that kind of team. So if I go, if I had that choice, I would side with Snead.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Next one, a little bit of actually a lot of uncertainty. We saw Brandon Marshall miss some practice. He came back to practice. Eric Decker seemingly always hurt, but not really. Ryan Fitzpatrick left last game, and then they put in Geno Smith. He got hit hard because he doesn't move around well in the pocket, and he had to bring back in Fitzpatrick with one hand. So, I mean, nobody seems to really know anything definitive on who's going to start. Obviously, the preferred start for the Jets and for all of us is Ryan Fitzpatrick, but both guys pretty cheap, and Decker and Marshall just continue to get theirs, and this is not a good Jacksonville defense. So I'm kind of waiting on the news here, but I definitely want a piece of this passing game.
Yeah, I know Decker is always on the injury list, and he sort of falls out of bed on Sunday mornings and catches 6 passes and a touchdown. So, I mean, yeah, he's a fine play. I'm really into Brandon Marshall, especially if Fitzpatrick is under center for New York. He's taking on Devon House, the cornerback from Jacksonville. Marshall has a 4-inch, 36-pound advantage on him, and if we've seen one thing in Marshall's old age, it's that he knows how to use a size advantage, knows how to kind of box out, especially in the red zone, especially in the end zone. So I think that his touchdown potential is really, really solid here.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, he's been one of the more consistent guys in all of football. I mean, maybe not huge upside at his current price, but definitely a guy that I feel really good about in cash games because, I mean, It seems like every week he goes out there, gets his 8 to 10 catches, 100 yards, touchdown.
Right.
All these weird ways he's got all these catches, and he's always pulling them off his shoe tops or throwing the ball backwards the other team and apologizing for it, but he's getting there, so that's all we're really concerned about there. On the Jags side, of course, Blake Bortles has been a good fantasy quarterback, has not been a very good actual quarterback. Not the kind of guy you necessarily trust with the keys to your actual team. But as far as DFS goes, he's a guy, I mean, we've seen him on some big winning rosters. He's got upside. You don't really worry about how efficient he is necessarily as far as DFS goes because, I mean, if he gets the ball in the end zone, that's all you're really looking for here.
Yeah, I think last week was an aberration, with the Jets being roasted by Derek Carr and the Raiders. So much of that yardage and the touchdowns were yards after the catch, and that's a little fluky. So I don't think that the Jets are suddenly this secondary that we want to target.
Yeah.
The Jaguars, by a lot of measures, have the worst running game in the league. So they might have no choice but to drop back and pass it in this one. And you're right. I mean, Bortles, I think, is like 29th in accuracy accuracy on aim throws this year. So he's down there with Andrew Luck, which is pretty bad. Um,
Yeah, you normally at the beginning of the season you see him in Andrew Luck company, you think he's doing pretty well, but
yeah,
definitely not the case this season.
right, right.
Um, go ahead.
And talking about the Allens, Hearns and Robinson from Jacksonville. Allen Robinson is expected to see a lot of Darrelle Revis, maybe exclusively. I love A-Rob, but I don't know if I love him that much. And so if I'm going with a Jags receiver, it's going to be Hearns. Hearns is $1,100 cheaper than Robinson on DraftKings, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to expect for him to out-target Robinson this week. He also has a much better matchup in going against Antonio Cromartie, who's really struggled. I know that we're not used to seeing that or saying that, but Hearns, I think Hearns is a nice GPP throw in at a really low cost.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said with Cromartie, it's a name recognition thing. Everyone maybe shy away from him because it's a perceived tough matchup, but really isn't the case right now. This next one could be exciting. Steelers and Raiders, mentioning Derek Carr, who, if it weren't for that insane 91-point game in the Superdome last week, he would have been the top scorer by far. Now he's facing a Steelers team that played well defensively last week, but still not a believer this is a great defensive unit. And Carr has looked good. Obviously, the big story in this game, though, Le'Veon Bell out, so we've got D'Angelo Williams. Going to be a popular play this week. So what's your take on D'Angelo Williams? Let's say, what's your ownership percentage in cash games with D'Angelo?
You mean my personal or
yeah, for you?
Yeah, he's going to be in, I would say 90% of my cash games, and the reason doesn't necessarily have to do with the fact that I think he's going to go bonkers on the ground, because Oakland's run defense has been pretty solid. Only one team has allowed more running back receptions this season than the Raiders. Basically, anybody being covered by the Raiders linebackers they're going to catch footballs. I mean, that's what we have here with tight ends going crazy against them. Running backs too. And Williams is going to be the workhorse by all accounts. I don't think Isaiah Peed is going to impinge on his workload at all. And so I think that 3 or 4 or 5 catches is definitely in his range of outcomes. In a game that I like to be pretty high scoring, and then he's going to get goal line carries as well. So for pretty cheap, you can have quite the upside with D'Angelo.
Yeah, and he's going to be very popular. So like you said, just get him in there. It makes a lot of sense. And then one guy, ridiculously good discount on DraftKings from this game. You mentioned here you're big on him, and I found it nearly impossible to get away from him myself. Whenever Ben Roethlisberger is under center, Heath Miller, especially in a good matchup, has a great floor. He gets red zone looks. He gets a little bit of everything. And we saw it last week. Bengals kind of gave him the middle of the field, said, hey, bend but don't break, and that's fine. Obviously, I'm not expecting that similar sort of game plan necessarily from the Raiders, but Heath Miller is, I mean, outside of Antonio Brown, definitely Ben Roethlisberger's favorite target. We've seen it for years and years. And his DraftKings price this week is just absolutely baffling. I just don't see any way. I keep putting him into way more tournament lineups than I feel good about.
Right, tight end 23 on DraftKings. He's much more expensive on FanDuel. Expensive enough for me to kind of look twice on FanDuel. But I mean, like I said, anybody being covered by the Raiders linebackers who can and will be involved in a passing attack, you want them on your roster in some way. So he's like Heath Miller is the rare punt play who also has like a crazy high floor, right? I mean, it would be baffling if he doesn't catch 5 balls here.
Oh yeah, and I mean, last week we saw 10, and I'm not saying I'm predicting 10, but if that happens, I'm not going to bat an eye. I would not be surprised by that. And this is, I mean, the guy's about 65 years old. He's been doing this since I was a kid. So, I mean,
he's so old, I know.
Yeah, I can hardly remember a time where Heath Miller was not the tight end for the Steelers, aside from the times he's been hurt. So
right. I mean, I had him in fantasy back when Terry Bradshaw was throwing passes. So, I mean, that was...
Yeah, he was the first-round pick back then. He was the Rob Gronkowski of the 70s. Aside from these guys, of course, a guy that I've been loving as a cheap value last couple weeks, and he's been, I guess... I guess the analogy, kind of the Eric Decker of the Raiders is Michael Crabtree. He's always been a good receiver. I never thought he was a great. I mean, maybe he was a great college receiver, but that's irrelevant. He's a guy that's just been consistent all year long. Doesn't have massive upside, but he's a guy that, he's going to get his 5 to 6 catches. Hopefully he gets some upside. Maybe he gets a touchdown catch. But he's a guy that I feel good about. He was one of the group this week that you feel good about. He and Decker especially is cheap cash game guys for your wide receiver spots.
Yeah, Crabtree is seeing a lot of single coverage as defenses sort of freak out and tilt the coverage toward Amari Cooper, and for good reason. Amari Cooper is much more explosive, but Crabtree, like you said, I mean, he's not terrible. I mean, he can hold his own against single coverage. So I talked about how I'm a little hesitant about the Oakland's passing attack here, even though they've been decent. The Steelers get so much pressure on the passer, but anyway, I think that Crabtree is a fine. I don't have him in GPPs, but I do have him in cash.
Yeah. Last thing about this one. This is kind of my personal take. Obviously, watching that Steelers Bengals game last week, you kind of mentioned it here. In effect, if you say looks like he put on 30 pounds, I thought he looked terrible. I mean, the Ben Roethlisberger that you want to play, that has the upside. And I'm trying to take my personal bias out of it as a Bengals fan. But either way, I mean, the way that he always killed the Bengals, the way that he always had his upside with everyone else, is the ability to get outside the pocket and make plays. And he couldn't move. I mean, he looked like Peyton Manning in the pocket last week.
Yeah,
it scares me.
Did he really like what did he do during those 4 weeks or 5 weeks that he was out? I mean, did he literally just sit there and eat donuts from them? I mean, because he
probably had a couple pizzas.
He is like, okay, he's listed at like 250. That's a joke. That is a joke. If he's 250, I'm like 85 pounds. Okay,
yeah. And Jared Lorenzen's 250 if he's 250.
Yeah, no, this guy Roethlisberger tips the scale at 300, or he's 10 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you still can't tackle the guy, but without that mobility, I mean, I'm hesitant because I love Antonio Brown. I love his upside, but I feel like if I'm getting one piece of that passing attack, Heath Miller's the only one I really feel good about. I'm not saying I'm not playing Antonio Brown, but Roethlisberger's got to look a lot better than he did last week for Brown to have upside, I think.
Yeah, but Oakland's secondary is sneaky horrible. I think that I am playing Roethlisberger in cash, so I do feel good about his floor, despite being 300 pounds.
Yeah, he definitely has a high floor. I just maybe it's just me. I'm a little hesitant on the ceiling, but
sure.
maybe that'll kill me in tournaments not having enough. So maybe you talk me into him. I don't know if I can go cash yet, but I'll just get my Ty God Taylor and move on.
Yeah, I know that. But that's the thing. I mean, go with a guy who you feel more confident with his floor, and I do. I feel more confident with Ty God. Yeah, Ty God's floor than I do with Roethlisberger.
And I've got no Brian Hoyer to put in my cash games this week. So
I know.
I got to do something.
The worst.
And I'm not lying. I really do play him in cash games almost every single week. But either way, this next one, really the only thing that I see as a negative, and I'm sure you're on the same page here with the Falcons and Julio Jones' upside, is the fact that the 49ers are just so bad that he might not need to do much late. But this is a tremendous matchup for him. It's a great matchup for Devontae Freeman. I'm going to have some pieces of either one. I don't think I'll have a full-blown stack with Freeman and Jones, but I'll have some Ryan Freeman, some Ryan Jones, and I don't. He's one of those situations where I don't mind putting Freeman in there with Matt Ryan because he does catch passes. He's got the ability to catch a couple of them even, so I don't mind that. But I definitely want pieces of this offense.
Yeah, I don't have Matt Ryan anywhere. I have a lot of Freeman. I mean, the Falcons are 7-point favorites. They should be 10. But when they have seized leads early, they just force feed Freeman, and I think that's what we'll see here. A little narrative street for you. The Niners are in the most disarray of any team in recent history, so it's just I think it's a situation where Freeman, like last week, could score 20 fantasy points and not score, like he did. So just get him in. For me, he's a plug and play.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw this, but there was a tweet earlier where Random guy made a tweet, said source, talking about how that 49ers waited to get Blaine Gabbert in there
Yeah.
to face I think he said weak or terrible Atlanta secondary, and then the Falcons just retweeted,
Oh, what a great tweet! That's the tweet. That's the tweet of the year for any NFL account.
Yeah, it is.
It's just and yeah, and look at the Falcons. You gotta find a way to get them in a lot of your lineups. GPP, cash. It doesn't matter. Blaine Gabbert has a 57% career completion percentage. I mean, that is off the charts awful. Okay. Combined with that, he's going to have to throw a lot in this game. I mean, I would set the over under at 2.5 for interceptions.
Yep.
And so yeah, I think the Falcons defense is just an easy play, and then you have the motivation factor there from that.
Yeah. You really had to throw some fuel on the fire. I mean, they just tossed the entire gas can in the fire with that one. But I mean, Blaine Gabbert,
he's awful.
I didn't think he was good in college, personally. Like, I thought he was average in college. But either way, I mean, there's situations, there's Zach Mettenberger situations where you take a shot in the GBP at upside. There's no way in hell Blaine Gabbert. If I find out Blaine Gabbert's on one of my lineups, I'm finding out who hacked me, and right. somebody's going to pay for that one.
Right. I mean, Gabbert's floor is 1 fantasy point, and his ceiling is 7. Yeah. You know, it just don't.
It's so much more likely that he throws a touchdown pass to a Falcons defender than to any of these fringe NFL players he has on offense this week.
He has no running back. I mean, they signed Pierre Thomas off his couch a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
It's shaping up just to be a bloodbath, and you want to make sure you're on the right side of this bloodbath.
Yeah, team total of 19 points, right around some other teams. We were talking about right by Miami too. That's insanity. That might be bet of the week on team total under. I'll take the under on 14 probably in that one.
Yeah.
Buccaneers and Giants here got a nice total in this one, 48 points. 25.5 for the Giants. Like you mentioned here, you don't think they're going to be pushing 100 points. Obviously, that's not going to happen very often. But I mean, Eli Manning has actually looked really good this season. It seems like he's been Jekyll and Hyde over the past couple of years. But I'm obviously a little bit of recency bias there, as good as he was last week. But I mean, aside from really that one game against Philly, I mean, he's been really good this year. Mike Evans, you and I were talking about it. I'm still a little bitter about that one. I had him. I mean, I won't say littered across lineups because littered indicates that I didn't have him everywhere, and I had a ton of Mike Evans. All my best teams weren't great because of Evans. All my good teams weren't good enough because of Mike Evans. I mean, I'm not afraid of him, but it's Jameis Winston kind of takes a little bit away from him.
Yeah, without all those targets, I don't know if I can play him in cash. I mentioned this. I mentioned this because it's astounding the size advantage he has on Jaron Hosley, who will be the guy covering him this week mostly. 53 pounds and 7 inches. Okay, like that. It does the size advantage for a receiver it doesn't get bigger than that. So, if you wonder about his role or his possibility for a potential for a touchdown, I think that the Bucs will possibly recognize that size difference, and so you might have something there. So, I'm going to cop out and say Mike Evans in a GPP. I just don't think he's cash material right now.
Yeah, I mean, that size difference, I mean, that's you or I playing basketball with our 10-year-old son. I mean, I don't have a 10-year-old son yet, but either way, I'm just saying it's not fair. It's let's go back out in the backyard and let me just show you who's boss real quick. Like that's what's going to be the situation there. Your mention here, avoiding the Giants' backfield, I'm on board. Really, the only guy I ever had targeted in tournaments this season was Shane Vereen, just because he has that upside in the passing game. But I mean, his floor is Blaine Gabbert low. I mean, it's bad. So Odell Beckham Jr. though, as far as top receivers overall this week, where does he rank for you?
I mean, in a game that I think could go way over the Vegas projection, I prefer him over Julio, just because I think that the Bucs can do things against this horrible Giants defense, and but with Julio, we you look at the competition and the potential insane game script. It's a little that's a little frightening. So, yeah, OBJ is in almost every one of my cash lineups. According to Pro Football Focus's matchup chart, he has the number one matchup this week against a secondary that has been just lit on fire recently. So yeah, I'm very comfortable with OBJ.
Yeah, same here. Next up, this one's going to be, I guess, a good battle. I just, as the way that the Colts have looked, the way that Andrew Luck has looked, and the way that the Broncos played. I mean, granted, this game's not in Denver. This game is indoors at Indianapolis. I just don't. I keep racking my brain. I can't see a scenario where any offense has much success against this Broncos defense because, I mean, they're truly just incredibly dominant right now.
Yeah, Hilton is hurt. Moncrief, I don't think that Moncrief is a guy who you're going to play if Hilton misses time. The one guy that I think might be worth a look is Kobe Fleener, who's really cheap. And last week when the Carolina secondary was shutting down the receivers for Indianapolis, Fleener saw, I think it was 11 targets. And so I think that's what we have here. I mean, Luck is going to throw a lot, obviously. I mean, it's just going to happen. Yeah. So those balls have to go somewhere, and Fleener is the guy who comes in on obvious passing downs, and so I think 10, 11, 12 targets is in the works for him. But yeah, I just think that fading the whole Colts offense might be the way to go.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, just if you haven't seen it, look at the box score from last week's Carolina Indianapolis game because it's incredible that you see Hilton and Moncrief both just be essentially completely taken out. Yeah. And I mean, yes, Luxto did compete in that game, but I mean, still threw 3 picks. I just don't have. I have so much more faith in the Broncos defense against anyone in the entire world than I do with Andrew Luck. So I'll still have the Broncos defense in some. I mean, that DraftKings price for the Broncos defense, I don't care who they're playing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's ridiculously. I might play them in 80% of my GPPs at that price.
Yeah, I mean they could just blow the roof off. I think in this one, and I like stacking the Broncos defense with Ronnie Hillman, who is going to get another start here. The Colts are 6th most generous team against running backs. You have to imagine that the Broncos will run it quite a bit because that's what they did last week when they got a lead. So Hillman, I think Hillman is he's still really cheap. I wouldn't worry too much about Anderson. I know C.J. Anderson went over 100 yards. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I want the starter. I want the guy who can get 20 touches, and I don't think Anderson is that guy for several reasons.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Cowboys and Eagles, Sunday night game. In years past, this will be a really exciting game, and I mean, it may still be, but Des Bryant's back. Really doesn't even matter at this point because there's no one that can get him the ball. Everyone thought Brandon Weeden was terrible. Matt Castle, if you ask most people, probably been even worse. It's a hopeless situation for this Cowboys passing attack until Tony Romo comes back. By that point, it seems like it's obviously going to be too late for their playoff hopes anyway, unless they were in the AFC South. But but Darren McFadden, though, he's getting a ton of touches. He's looked good, and it's never been a question of whether or not Darren McFadden was talented. It's always been can he stay healthy and what's his role in an offense. So what's your take on McFadden this week?
I think that his passing game involvement keeps him in the cash game discussion. I mean, the Eagles are really strong against the run, but the Cowboys seem intent on after that Giants debacle with Castle, they seem intent on just kind of keeping it safe, keeping it on the ground. So even when they fall behind, like they might here, well, they probably will here. I think McFadden won't kind of fall out of the game. I think that he's weirdly sort of game script proof, but I don't know. I don't see much of a reason to go in on him because his price is not like it was 2 weeks ago when it was just, I think he was like 3,300 on DraftKings, and now that's not the case at all. So I'm not huge on DMC this week.
Okay. On the Eagles side, Sam Bradford, you mentioned you're not able to trust him as a cash game option. I don't know that he'd play himself in a cash game option
Yeah.
for $250 or less or whatever the limit is. But I just I DeMarco Murray's looked like the best weapon in this offense, as you mentioned here, and rightfully so. But I don't trust Jordan Matthews. He can't seem to catch the ball. I just don't know. This is a game. It's a Sunday night game with two offenses that could and maybe should score points, but I can't pinpoint where I'm trying to look on this one.
Yeah, that's a good point. I struggle with finding out where those points might be coming from. Watch the status of Ryan Matthews, who has been sort of in and out of practice and on the injury report. I think if Matthews doesn't go, I think Murray becomes a really appealing option. The team seems to have gotten away from those stretch plays with Murray, which were not working because that's not who he is. They're getting him more north-south, and his ownership is going to be really low.
Yeah,
could be mostly because of what happened last time Philly played Dallas, and they, I think the Eagles had like 30 total yards at halftime.
Yeah, it was it was brutal. That game was horrible. I think that was the one with the touchdown with 15 seconds left from Bradford to Jordan Matthews that bailed me out, bailed everyone else out that made the mistake of playing that duo in cash games. So this last one though is exciting. I like this one. 49-point Monday Night Football game. We got a good one here. Bears team total 22.5 points just seems way too low to me. I know we have no Matt Forte. Jeremy Langford going to be a fairly popular play. I kind of like Jay Cutler in cash games. What's your take there?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, he's taken to this offense, this Adam Gase offense, and with Alshon back, if Alshon wasn't in the lineup, then I would just totally ignore Cutler. Yep. But I really like him in this matchup. I know teams have attacked the Chargers on the ground, but that kind of masks the fact that San Diego is not great on the back end, in the secondary, and Eric Weddle, I believe, is not supposed to play again. So that's
one good defender.
Yeah, so that's a boost for Cutler. I'm gonna have some exposure to Cutler. I actually have Cutler, just on a related note, on all my seasonal teams this week, all my season long teams. So King DGAF got to do something, man.
Yeah, he was a guy I went out. I've got brothers that don't watch fantasy football but asked me for advice, and I said, "Can you get Jay Cutler? Go get Jay Cutler."
Yeah,
I mean, I'd play most people against this San Diego defense, but I mean, like you mentioned, Cutler has actually been good too. It's not purely a matchup play. So outside of those guys, I mean, Chargers side, obviously no Keenan Allen now. Right. Looks like Antonio Gates will probably be maybe not 100%, but should still be back into his old role. So you got to get a piece of this passing attack outside of the tight end, but like, who do we trust here? Because Stevie Johnson hasn't been consistent.
Yeah.
Dontrell Inman for some tournaments maybe. But, I mean, I want to get one of these guys in my cash games because of the high volume. I just don't know if I can do it. Yeah,
I mean, Stevie Johnson is, I think, wide receiver 53 on DraftKings, which is just so low. With Keenan Allen out, I think that Johnson can be pretty bad and still, still exceed his price point. So I don't mind him so much. I want to say one thing about Gates. Besides the injury, this is on paper, this is a really bad matchup. Even when you apply context, like we were talking about earlier with the Browns against tight ends, no team has allowed fewer yards or receptions to opposing tight ends than the Bears. I mean, tight ends are just not producing against Chicago. Gates is going to see his targets. He's seeing 9.1 targets this season in 3 games. So, but I'm just not incredibly bullish on him like I usually am.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation with that passing attack because someone's going to catch 6, 8, 9 passes.
Somebody.
It's got to be someone that's not Antonio Gates because someone's got to get the ball thrown to him 44 times a game with Phillip Rivers. So it's going to be you nail the right guy in your cash games if you go that route. gonna definitely do well for you. So.
Right.
Last game on the slate there, so that's going to wrap things up here for us for week 9. Make sure you check this out. Check out Denny's article, all the things we talked about, and then some more here. We're on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our NFL content at dailyfantasycafe.com.